Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 9, Episode 10, The Strike. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing okay. I am in the middle of a hate watch binge experience, and I wanted to share this because the only way I'm getting through this hate watch is because there is a podcast kind of in conjunction that I'm listening to so that I can get all of my hate justified and validated by the podcast. So the show that I'm hate watching is called Emily in Paris. It is on Netflix. And the corresponding podcast, the hate watch podcast, is called Enemy in Paris. It's hosted by Sam Kiefer and Beck Hill, and it is fantastic. I hate that show, Emily in Paris, so much. And it's all the elements. It is terrible writing, pretty bad acting, just all the writing pitfalls that really annoy me. And I'm having so much fun. I know it sounds really negative, and I am not a very negative person, but something about watching a show, recognizing what's wrong with it, and then listening to two very intelligent people discuss why the show is so terrible, why the characters are so terrible, why the writing is so terrible. It just scratches me where I itch. But it's funny, I don't want to subject people to watching Emily in Paris because once again, it's so dumb and it's just so bad on so many levels. But if you want something to take your mind off of the shit show that is our world right now, our country, our government, all this bullshit, I highly recommend watching Emily in Paris and then listening to Enemy in Paris. It's a great way to just get your mind onto something so dumb and pointless, and then listening to it all be justified by very intelligent hosts of a podcast that is very entertaining. So there's my little 2 cents and advice for you. And then no surprise, I'm also going to promote once again Wiser Than Me by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Get on that if you are not already on that. I just listened to the Isabella Rossellini episode this week, and I admittedly didn't know a ton about her. I knew she was an actress and a model and that kind of stuff. I know she appeared on an episode of Friends. She was on Ross's wish list or cheat list or whatever you want to call it, your list of people you're allowed to cheat with. And she ends up guest starring on the show because, of course, wouldn't she just walk into Central Park? And she's very cute in that. Anyway, super inspiring woman. She came up as the daughter of Ingrid Bergman, you're talking about probably the most famous actress in Hollywood at the time. Her father was a renowned director. And so she just was growing up in this environment where everything was about looks and fame, and she got into that as well with being a model and then eventually being an actress. But she also figured out that this isn't going to last forever. My looks aren't going to last forever. And I'm not the type of person to put myself through all these treatments or surgeries or, I'm not going to try and stay skinny and beautiful. I'm just going to live my life. And she just had a curiosity about so many things in the world. She ended up going and getting her master's, and now she is this farmer. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Again, the whole show, the point of that show is to listen to women who are wiser than me, as Julia says. She says so much wiser than me, wiser than all of us. The wisdom of these older women, it's phenomenal. And I find it so inspiring every week. You don't have to be a woman to be inspired by them. I think we need to stop that bullshit stereotype. Anyone can be inspired by these stories. So yeah, once again, I'm going to yell at you. Get on it. And then also Not as deep. I highly recommend Enemy in Paris in conjunction with watching Emily in Paris. Although they do get listener feedback saying, I can't bring myself to watch the show. I tried to watch it. I can't, but I still really enjoy listening to your podcast. I need to see it. I want to see the episode that they're talking about. It's a hate rewatch podcast. So just like this show, they go, episode by episode. And so, yeah, I like to see it. I like to see the episode that they're talking about because so many times during the episode, and I'm hate watching it with my daughter, which has been also just a really bonding experience. Hating something together, parents, that is a way to really, really bond with your children. It's so negative, but at the same time, I'm just at such a fuck it point in my journey, post-election. I'm like, if it makes me happy, I'm doing it. And I don't fucking care anymore. I got to look out for my mental health and brace myself for the absolute disaster that is guaranteed to happen in about 2 months. So with that uplifting message, why don't we get into this episode? The synopsis for the strike is as follows. Kramer goes back to his old job at H&H Bagels after a 12-year strike. George is unhappy with a Christmas card that said a gift to a charity was made in his name until he realizes he can use the same idea to get out of sending Christmas gifts. Jerry is troubled that his girlfriend looks attractive only in certain lighting, while Elaine tries to retrieve a sub-club card on which she wrote her fake phone number. George is ashamed of a holiday his father invented during George's childhood. This episode was written by Dan O'Keefe, Alec Berg, and Jeff Schaefer. We start out at Tim Whatley's party. Jerry, George, and Elaine are there. It's a Hanukkah party since he's still Jewish, as Elaine points out. Jerry says it's a breeze to be Jewish without the parents. Tim walks in and greets them carrying some mistletoe. He motions to Elaine, maybe a kiss underneath the mistletoe, and she rejects him with a big old smile. Tim thanks George for the Yankee tickets. Oh yeah, he says, I'm still good with the ground crew. Oh, I gotta circulate. Tim makes a beeline for a busty lady in a tight dress. Happy Hanukkah, Tiffany. Elaine comments that this is like Studio 54 with a menorah. Elaine spots a guy across the room with a denim vest on, and he's very obviously checking her out. Tells Jerry, ooh, fake phone number's coming out tonight. Oh, you have a standard fake, he asks. And apparently she does, and it spells out, no Elaine. Jerry spots a pretty woman that he wants to talk to, but Elaine doesn't want him to leave because Denim Vest is coming over. He's smoothing it. Jerry leaves anyway, and Denim Vest approaches and says hi. We cut to Jerry and the pretty woman he's talking to. He introduces himself, and his opening line is that he can run really, really fast. And she's totally charmed by this. Back to Elaine and Denim Vest. She compliments the vest, especially the big metal buttons. They're snaps, he corrects. Then he asks her out. Why don't I give you my phone number, she says. The actress in this scene who Jerry talks to is Karen Feynman. She plays Gwen. We later find out that's her name. She's also appeared in Law and Order, Silk Stockings, and Chicago Hope. And it looks like she left Hollywood pretty soon after appearing in this episode. She has no acting credits past 1998, and I really couldn't find any other internet presence. I mean, I Googled her. I couldn't find her. That's as deep as I go. I really like her, though. I think she's a really good actress, very funny. I think she plays Gwen very well. My take on the scene, what a fabulous opening scene. We're bringing Tim Whatley back, which is a great move. And I love that he's still Jewish. I love that whole thing. Although the mistletoe, I think that's strictly Christmas. But again, as we know, Tim Whatley is allowed to represent both since he used to be Catholic. I do wonder, why isn't Kramer at the party? Kramer was invited to the night before Thanksgiving party that Tim Whatley threw, so they're buddies. I just think it's kind of odd. All four of them at the party I think would have been really fun, so I did miss Kramer at the party. We introduce Elaine's plot here. She meets Denim Vest, and we learn about her standard fake phone number. Now, I've definitely given out wrong phone numbers to get a dude off my back, but I definitely didn't have a standard fake, but more of just like a standard method where I would invert a couple numbers in my phone number, or maybe just have like one digit off. And I guess I did that. So in case I ever saw that person again, I could pass it off as some like careless mistake. Like, oh my gosh, I just switched the numbers. That's crazy. Because instead of being direct, I am of the generation where, we women have to be polite to men who make us uncomfortable. So I'm still not good at that. I think as I get older, I can be pretty direct, but at the same time, I can just say I'm married. So if I do get hit on, I can say that instead. Fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, however you want to look at this, I do not get hit on very often. So this is not something that I have to do on a regular basis. Denim Vest is played by Kevin McDonald. Now, I know this is not a female character or an actress playing, but I did want to cover him because, well, he's just a favorite of mine. I used to watch Kids in the Hall growing up. It's a Canadian sketch comedy show. Look it up immediately if you're not familiar. I think it's on a streaming service now. Anyway, I also had the great fortune to cross paths with him a few times in my improv and sketch career. I took 3 workshops. He came to Detroit a few times. He came to Denver. I was at a comedy festival in Omaha, Nebraska, where he was. And so I took a bunch of workshops with him, and he remembered me, which was very flattering. But one of the biggest, thrills was one of the workshops I took with him was for writing sketches. And so that night at the theater, he was doing his show. He was doing like a one-man show, but then he was also doing an improv set with a few of the cast members of the theater. But to open the show, he selected 2 sketches from the workshop that was happening earlier that day. And he chose mine. It was so thrilling. He liked my sketch. So we worked through for the day. The workshop was, he chooses a sketch and then you cast it, you rehearse it, you kind of block it with him. So I got to work with him, and he couldn't be more humble. He's extremely nice, extremely smart, and of course, hilarious. And the thrill on top of that thrill, that same night, he did kind of a Q&A after his show. And so I got to raise my hand and ask him about his experience playing Denim Vest on Seinfeld. And he was very thrilled that I asked that question. He was like, oh yeah, Seinfeld. He said he had a great experience, but he did learn that they weren't so keen on the actors making suggestions about jokes. He was like, no one was rude to me. In fact, Julia Louis-Dreyfus was extremely, extremely sweet. She was so great to work with. So of course I loved hearing that. But he did say that, it's a very intense atmosphere. They're just, it's a well-oiled machine at this point. It's a top comedy. This was their last season. And so they were just, the things just have to move along. So they don't want people stopping like, hey, why don't I say this instead? So he's like, yeah, I learned that pretty quick that they're not open to suggestions. But he said that it was a very good experience. Anyway, Kevin McDonald, super, super special place in my heart for him. I'm going to find some pictures from those experiences. There's one that my friend took of me on stage with Kevin, discussing, we were working together discussing my sketch. And so it was pretty cool. I will put that on the Hot and Heavy Instagram if you guys are interested. Back to the scene, JLD is awesome too. Her delivery of big metal buttons. So funny. I do that in real life. If I'm ever presented with the opportunity to point out big metal buttons or snaps, I can't not say it. All right, next we're in Monks. Jerry and George are updating each other on the post-party status. Jerry is going out with the woman that he met at the party, and, well, George ate too many cocktail franks. He had to call in sick to work. Jerry's like, didn't you call in sick the day before? He's like, yeah, but he's not worried. He works at Kruger. We don't care, and it shows. George opens his mail, and he has a card from Watley. He's excited, but turns out his gift is that Watley made a donation in George's name to the Children's Alliance. And of course, this pisses George off. After all, George got him Yankee tickets, and Watley gave his gift to someone else. Jerry points out it's to a children's charity. Oh, well, this doesn't assuage George at all. He thinks it's wrong, and he believes in an eye for an eye. Elaine walks in. The waitress approaches, and Elaine says, oh, nothing for me. She says to the guys that she's going to Atomic Sub later since she has this punch card, and it's almost full. One more sub, and she'll be a submarine captain. Jerry's like, well, what does that mean? Free sub. George groans looking at a piece of mail. It's a card from his father, and Elaine snatches it. She's wondering why is it bumming him out. She reads it. It says, "Dear son, happy Festivus?" What is Festivus? Jerry starts explaining what it is while George protests. "Jerry, no!" Elaine is so delighted to hear that Festivus is a holiday that Frank made up because of his hatred of the commercial and religious aspects of Christmas. Oh, and another piece of the puzzle falls into place. Such a great line. This is why George is so fucked up. And Jerry brings up more details, the aluminum pole instead of a tree. It's just making George so mad. Jerry continues, "Weren't there feats of strength that always ended up with you crying?" Well, George snaps, "Now I'm going to work. Are you happy now?" And Elaine and Jerry just laugh and laugh as he exits. My take, this is some of my favorite JLD acting. I love this plot for Elaine. It's another example of a plot that's very gender neutral. It could have easily been given to Kramer or George, but Elaine's obsession with completing the 24 sub card in order to get a free sub and possibly a captain's hat. It's just delightful. Again, I love when they do this, when it's like, hey, this could have gone to anyone. Let's give it to the woman. It's not something you would typically see a woman be excited about, especially in a sitcom. And so I love it. I think it's so brilliant that they gave this to Elaine. Her delivery of free sub, it's almost George-like. Like when Jerry calls him out, like, "What are you doing?" When he's like, "Back it up, beep, beep, beep." And George just kind of looks down all ashamed, like, I don't know. I get that vibe with her free sub. We get a micro Benestanza moment here when she snatches that card away from George. And just notice JLD's performance when she knows that a traumatic story from George's past is about to be told. She is so giddy. Like she's looking at Jerry. She's like, ooh, I can't wait to hear this. Like I said, I love another piece of the puzzle line. It's so fun. It's like, yeah, okay, this is all making sense. You are such a fucked up weirdo. And it's probably because you had an aluminum pole in your house and was forced to fight your dad. And lastly, Jerry and Elaine laughing at George to close out the scene is the best. We saw that in the last episode with the neck hole issue. George being laughed at by the two of them. It's a great way to end a scene. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Elaine and Jerry walk in and Kramer is lounging, enjoying some VCR manual reading. After searching her purse, Elaine realizes she doesn't have her atomic sub card. Oh no, she wrote her fake number on the back of it and gave it to Denim Vest. She really has a desire to get that free sub after 23 bad subs. She says it's like a long bad movie, but you want to see the end. Jerry's like, no, you walk out. Okay, it's like a boring book, but you got to finish it. No, you wait for the movie. And she doesn't know how to explain it anymore except, I want that free sub. Jerry tries to convince her that that card isn't needed. It's a high-end hoagie outfit. They're using technology. We're cloning sheep now. Which Kramer doesn't believe. He just thinks it's a magic trick. I do remember this. Dolly the sheep. I remember this from the 90s. They're cloning sheep. Elaine figures she needs to get a hold of Denim Vest, and Jerry has the idea to call your fake number and see if he's called. Oh, Elaine likes that idea. She picks up Jerry's phone, but right then, Kramer's cordless phone starts ringing. He gets the news that the strike is over and he's going back to work. Jerry and Elaine are befuddled. You? Work? He shows them his business card from H&H Bagels. He was on strike for 12 years. Elaine's like, oh yeah, I kind of remember those guys out there, but I haven't seen him in a while. Well, yeah, Kramer says H&H wouldn't let them use their bathroom. Really put a dent in our solidarity. Elaine looks at Jerry kind of amused. What were your demands? $5.35 an hour, and that's what they're paying. I believe that's the new minimum wage. And you know who to thank for that, Kramer says. Well, Kramer's got to go, and Jerry asks him on his way out why he never mentioned this. And Kramer said he was embarrassed to let Jerry know he was out of work. My take, very funny exchange between Elaine and Jerry regarding her whole, her need to finish that punch card. And the comparisons to the bad movie or bad book. Now, I've abandoned both, although I don't think I've ever walked out of a theater based on the movie being so bad. I've definitely stopped movies I've rented or watched on streaming, but to bail in a theater, I think I'm so hung up on the fact that I spent a lot of money on this ticket. I'm going to stay. That being said, I've had to walk out of movies because of my kids. My daughter's very first movie, I think she was only like 3 at the time, was Monsters, Inc. 2. And she got too scared and we had to leave. And we also had to leave in the middle of Boss Baby because my son threw up. And to be honest, it was a very accurate reaction to that garbage movie. Boss Baby is so offensively terrible. It's so bad. I do have this memory. My best friend, she had to walk out of a movie. She went to see a movie called Deconstructing Harry with her mom. It was a Woody Allen movie. Thought it was going to be really good. And the very first scene was a couple having very graphic sex. And I think there was a lot of dirty talk. It was basically the woman getting it from behind. And so it was the opening scene. My friend's like, oh shit. And her mom was like, what is this? And her mom made them walk out. And fun fact, the actress who was getting it from behind and being super filthy was played by none other than Julia Louis-Dreyfus. That's right. She was in Deconstructing Harry, and it was her scene that was too much for my friend's mom and made them walk out of the movie. I do find it harder to abandon books. I'm always like, oh, it's probably going to get better. It's a book. I don't know why I have this mentality. Like I really should finish it. But no, I've done it actually a few times recently. I'm like, no, this is not worth my time. I'm done with it. All right, back to the scene. The delivery of, I want that free sub. There's so much emotion behind it. You just really feel it. Elaine is on a mission. So we move Elaine's story along here. Now she has to get in touch with Denim Vest by calling her fake number. I love the reaction to Kramer's news about going back to work. It's just perfect. Like, what? You worked? And the way Elaine says, what were your demands? Oh, it's so condescending, but really good delivery. All right, next we're at H&H Bagel. Kramer comes in and yells, I'm back. The guy behind the counter asks, who are you? Kramer introduces himself and jogs the guy's memory. He asks if the other guys came back. No, I'm sure they got other jobs like 10 years ago. Well, Kramer's there, and the guy's like, well, I could use some extra help for the holidays. All right, toss me an apron. Let's bagel. He shoves his jacket into the display case, which always cracks me up. He sees these raisin bagels and is so fascinated. I never thought I'd live to see that. Well, I don't know where Kramer's been because I looked it up and raisin bagels have been around since the 1950s. All right, next we're at a horse track betting place. Elaine is at the window explaining about her fake number being their number. Oh, and the guy at the counter knows all about her. So you're Elaine Bennis. We've been getting calls for you for 5 years. Well, Elaine explains that she would like them to give Denim Vest her real number when he calls, and the guy just interrupts her to let his coworker Charlie know that Elaine Bennis is here. And Charlie right away knows the name Elaine Bennis. And then a bunch of dudes in the room repeat her name too. Elaine Bennis. Then the guy gets creepier and more aggressive, accusing Elaine of making a lot of man friends and that he and Charlie are both men. Charlie says, I'm a man. Well, the creep is just not giving Elaine a great vibe. No surprise. And so when he asks for her real number for the vest guy, of course, Elaine is smart and doesn't want to give her real number. So she sneaks Kramer's H&H card out and writes that number down. She also wants to put down a sawbuck on Captain Nemo in the third at Belmont. My take here, what a clever idea to have this standard fake number be a business. It could have just as easily been a private citizen. But I like that it's this horse track place. The interaction between Elaine and the fellows who work there, really funny. They are perfectly creepy. And the guy she's talking to is played by Tracy Letts. He is an incredibly accomplished actor and even more accomplished playwright. He won the Pulitzer Prize for the play he wrote, August Osage County. Isn't that insane? Now, they made a movie about it as well, starring Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts. I saw that movie. It was really, really good. I also saw the play. It was here in Denver. My good friend Lauren starred in it. Anyway, I just thought that was a really cool fact about this guy. I think he's really good in this role as well. And the guy who plays Charlie always reminds me of Jack Black, and he's really funny. I love his delivery of Elaine, Bennis, and also I'm a man. Ugh, makes me laugh every time. The progression of Elaine's story here is really done well in this scene. I like that we see the shot of the H&H card. Perfectly ridiculous and yet believable. I mean, I don't want Elaine giving her real number to these total creeps. So she's just repeating this pattern of giving a fake number to her fake number. And it's also a nice touch to have her bet on a horse as well. It's against trope and not something we'd see a female character doing in a sitcom. So no surprise. I absolutely love that. All right, next we're in a restaurant. Jerry is in the lobby and Tim Whatley happens to also be there with Tiffany. Jerry tells him, I'm actually meeting a woman who I met at your party. Mazel tov. Tim is so happy to be a little matchmaker. Gwen walks up and says hi. She looks very different. Jerry says, Gwen? Yeah. She tells him to come on. Our table's ready and walks away. Jerry is very confused and disgusted. He looks over at Tim, who gives him a sort of sympathetic yikes look. Some great bloopers here of this scene. Jerry cannot look at Bryan Cranston of course, Bryan Cranston's face is one of the best faces. I mean, he's super handsome, but then he can also make these faces that will either make you shit your pants because it's so scary and intense, or something like this where he's just like, oh, that sucks. Like he's got one of the best faces in the business. But yeah, Jerry cannot keep it together. You can actually tell, I think it's one of the blooper takes, but they cut it off and you can see it just a millisecond of Jerry starting to smile. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. George and Jerry are discussing how Gwen looked so different. And George calls her a two-face. Like the Batman villain, if that helps you. So Jerry's like, I'm not sure who's going to show up if I ask her out again, the good, bad, or the ugly. Clint Eastwood. George then shows Jerry the gifts he's been giving everyone at Kruger and pulling a Whatley. Jerry reads the card. A donation has been made in your name to the Human Fund. What's that? I made it up, George says. The Human Fund. Money for people. Kramer enters with free bagels. He tells the guys it was so great to be back and have his hands in that dough. Well, they pause biting into their bagels. Your hands were in the dough? He tells them he didn't make those bagels. Yeah, they're day old. The homeless won't even touch them. We see them bite into super hard and stale bagels. George has got to go. Jerry wishes him a happy Festivus. Kramer is curious what that is. And once again, Jerry starts explaining over George's protests. George cuts him off. He exclaims how it's a stupid holiday his father invented. It doesn't exist. Elaine arrives and says, Happy Festivus, Georgie. And then he walks out. Kramer is so impressed. Frank invented a holiday? So prolific. Elaine tells Kramer about her little phone relay. She says, if a guy calls H&H asking for me, you take a message. Jerry asks, you're still trying to get that free sub? Elaine says how she's spent a lot of time and eaten a lot of crap to get where she is today, and she's not throwing it all away now. Jerry asks, is there a captain's hat involved in this? Maybe. My take, not a lot to Elaine's portion, but she manages to have a really funny moment lamenting about the card. Her rant is so funny. I love how she says, I've eaten a lot of crap. And the maybe after Jerry asks about that captain's hat, perfectly delivered. That little look away and tugging on her pants. All JLD specialties in physicality. All right, next we're at H&H Bagel. Frank is there because Kramer left him a message. He's so interested in Festivus and he wants to know everything. Well, Frank tells the story that sparked Festivus. He was trying to buy a doll for George when he ended up beating up another father who reached for the same doll, the last one. And he thought to himself, there's got to be a better way. So a new holiday was born, a Festivus for the rest of us. Next, we're at the Kruger office. George is handing out his bogus gifts, either disappointing or injuring his coworkers. I always love when he goes, incoming! And off camera, we hear the guy go, ow, after George throws the card at him. He hands one to Mr. Kruger. What's this? The Human Fund. Whatever. Exactly. George's plan is working. Back at H&H Bagel, Frank is still explaining about Festivus, how at the dinner the family gathers and you tell them all the ways they've disappointed you over the past year. And that there's no tree, there's a pole that requires no decoration. He finds tinsel distracting. Kramer is so pumped. This is scratching him right where he itches. This inspires Frank to bring it back. He says, I'll get the pole out of the crawl space. As he exits, Elaine walks in and says, hello, Frank. He responds, hello, woman, and walks past her. Elaine asks if the vest called, and Kramer says no. Then he asks his boss for the 23rd off. Of course, the guy doesn't want to grant it. He says, hey, I need you for the holidays. This is the holidays. And Kramer argues that this guy is infringing on his right to celebrate new holidays. That's not a right. Well, it ought to be. Kramer goes back on strike, announces it's a walkout, and tells Elaine to come with them. But she's like, no, I got to wait for the call. You're siding with management? Scab! Scab! My take, we get a, I guess, would it be a Benestanza senior moment between Frank and Elaine? Maybe a Frelaine moment. The hello woman gets me every time. It's like a moment I forget about. I've seen this episode so many times, but I just forget about that one little hello woman. So whenever it pops up, I laugh. I literally laugh out loud. And it's the second time she's gotten a harsh reaction when she's being cordial. First with George screaming at her after her very genuine happy Festivus. And then she's being perfectly nice. Hello, Frank. Hello, woman. Father and son Costanza verbally abusing our Lainey. Next, we're in a cab. Gwen gets in and Jerry's a bit nervous to see her, but she looks great in this lighting. She tells the cabbie he might want to take the tunnel. And then while Jerry looks away, he's asking where she wants to eat. But then they enter the tunnel and the lighting changes, making her look, I use this in quotes, ugly, and startles Jerry. I could go either way, she says. You're telling me. I guess I'll address this now. This storyline, so apparently it's from Dan O'Keefe's real life. There was a woman in college who had this two-faced thing happening. He's like, she would be so pretty and then the light would shift and she looked, and I quote, he said, looked like a creature from the deep. I'm like, dang, God, it's so harsh. Now, I know we're in this time of like, everyone's beautiful and all this stuff, but let's be real, folks. I mean, we have people in our lives that we don't think are beautiful. It's okay to admit it. I don't think people should be shamed or should be made to feel lesser than anyone else. It should not fucking matter. That's not what I'm saying. But the opinions are still our opinions and we're entitled to them. Now, if you treat less attractive people like shit, that's on you. You're an asshole. But I think it's fine to think that people are not attractive and even think that people don't look good in certain lightings. It's human. We're all like that. We all can admit that. My friends and I, we didn't call them two faces, but we would call people like this good angle, bad angle. I'm a good angle, bad angle. Holy shit. I've got angles that I look like a creature from the deep. I'm not any better. And I do silently curse at people who don't look bad at any angle. I'm like, fuck off, man. Like, why are you like that? It's just my own pettiness. But anyway, what I'm talking about is this actress, Karen Feynman, the way they try to make her look ugly, it just doesn't work. It really, really doesn't work. I have a little bit of trivia about this whole thing later that I was like, okay, this kind of what I think they should have done. But stay tuned. I'll get to that later in the show. But yeah, it's a weird storyline. They definitely couldn't do that today. I do think it's human nature. I'm not going to get mad if someone thinks that someone looks bad in certain lighting or good in other lighting. And also, you have to take into account, this is Jerry. As Elaine says, just when I think you couldn't be any more shallow, you somehow managed to drain a little more out of the pool. Yeah, it's Jerry. Of course, this is going to bother him. Okay, next we're in Monks. Jerry is telling George how Gwen's look kept changing back and forth from ugly to pretty the entire date, like one of those 3D baseball cards. And then he mentions the only place she's consistently looked good is in the back booth of Monks. Well, problem solved, George says. Just bring her here. Jerry doesn't think he can keep bringing her to the coffee shop. What if things progress? Well, then lights out. All right, Jerry's like, I'll give it a shot. I really do love this coffee shop. I like that moment. Jerry notices George's cufflinks and compliments them. He says they were an office Christmas gift. His human fund plan is working. That's not a French cuffed shirt, you know. Oh, I know. He took off the button and poked a hole with the letter opener. Oh, that's classy. In comes Frank and Kramer. Frank is dragging the aluminum Festivus pole with him. George is horrified that Festivus is back. It's part of your heritage. George says, that's why I hate it. Kramer says everyone's invited to the Festivus dinner at Frank's house. And Frank has also brought a tape recorder from past feats of strength. We hear George getting yelled at. He's weak because he needs glasses. And oh my gosh, there's just all this screaming. It's awful. George loses it and runs out. I hate Festivus. Gwen enters looking quote unquote ugly, and Jerry is horrified. He introduces her to Kramer and Frank, and they are both so grossed out by how quote unquote ugly she is. Jerry ushers her to the back booth. They sit, and she looks gorgeous again. Now this is a good-looking booth. Next, we're at H&H Bagel. Kramer is picketing outside. Hey, no bagel, no bagel, no bagel, no bagel. It's hard to say. Inside, we see Elaine sitting at a table, just waiting for her phone call. The manager tells her, hey, if you want a sandwich, I'll make you a sandwich. But Elaine says she wants the one she earned, all choked up. The phone rings and she leaps to get it. H&H and Elaine. Kramer is calling from the phone booth directly outside and warns her to get out of there. He sabotaged the bagel machine. What did you do? You've been warned. And then she spots him outside and happily waves at him. The steam valve breaks, pouring steam into the shop, but turns out it's not going to really change anything. They can still make bagels. Very anticlimactic for Kramer. Elaine just shrugs at him. My take, choked up Elaine, wanting that Sammy she earned. Such a great moment. No one else understands her obsession with this mission to get her sub. There's also such desperation in her voice when she answers the phone. I love the H&H and Elaine. We see the stories move along here. This steam in the shop will lead to some trouble for Elaine. And it's so ridiculous because customers don't want to come into a steamy shop and get food. Gross. And of course it's going to affect the bagels. Like, even if it doesn't affect them being made, all the bagels in the shop are going to get gross and soggy because it's like a steam bath in there. But we got to let it go so that we can see what Elaine looks like after being in the steam. Next, we're at Kruger. Mr. Kruger stops George and tells him he needs to throw some money at a charity, and, well, they're all the same to me, so what's the difference? He hands George a check for $20,000 made out to the Human Fund. George is so shocked, and then Kruger realizes he locked himself out of his office again. Damn. All right, I'm going home, and walks away. Next, we're at Monk's. Gwen is so annoyed that they keep coming back to the coffee shop. Well, it's our place, Jerry says. I just found a rubber band in my soup. Oh, Jerry's so amused. I know who's cooking today. George enters and Gwen is over this. She leaves. George is like, ooh, soup. She didn't touch it. George finds the rubber band and flicks it away. Oh, Paco. A little racist? I think so. He hands Jerry the check for $20,000 and Jerry can't believe it. You're not keeping this. George says, well, I don't know. Excuse me? Well, George thinks he could start a charity and be a kick-ass philanthropist, doing nice things for people, and then they will owe me big time. And the first thing he's going to need is a driver. Next, we're back at H&H. Kramer is still picketing. Elaine comes out to tell him that the vest just called. And because of the steam, Elaine's hair is all wet and flat. Her makeup is running and smudged. Kramer's quite taken aback. He says, yumma humma, it's fright night. She's like, oh yeah, whatever. I got a little steam bath. She's so excited because in 10 minutes, she's going to have her hands on that atomic sub card. Kramer says, and? Free sub. Once again, no one really gets this except her. And she wants everyone to be so excited. Elaine exits and Gwen walks up and says hi to Kramer, but he doesn't recognize her because apparently she's in pretty lighting now. She reminds him who she is. I'm dating your friend Jerry. Oh no, Kramer doesn't think so. I met Jerry's girlfriend and she's not you. You're much prettier and like a foot taller. So Gwen kind of suspects that's why he's keeping me hidden in that coffee shop. He's two-timing her and he's afraid of getting caught. Kramer doesn't help at all by saying, oh, he's a tomcat. My take, oh my gosh, one of my favorite Elaine looks, very Alice Cooper. I think it's so funny. The Yamahama remains one of my favorite Kramer terms. I mean, I like yay. I like giddy up, but Yamahama, it's so funny. And then adding on, it's fright night. It's all great. So good. All right, next we're on the street. Elaine sees Denim Vest, who is named Steve. He's horrified at her, I guess, steamed look. He confirms, Elaine from Tim Watley's party? She's like, yeah, you look different. She says to him, I see you're still sticking with the denim. And if you guys look, it's amazing how much denim Kevin McDonald is wearing. It's a denim shirt, a denim vest, a denim jacket. It's just like taking denim to a new level. And also I need to point out that a Canadian tuxedo is jeans with a denim shirt. And Kevin McDonald is Canadian. So he's really, honoring his heritage here because, of course, that is truly Canadian heritage. She asks him for the card. He tells her he has it back at his place, but I can't go there now. How about I give it to you later? She says, no, you give me your number. He's hesitant, but he says, sure. As he's writing his number, he keeps just looking at her again, just baffled at how different she looks. He asks her if she's had the mumps. No. Typhoid? No. He hands her a piece of paper and then runs away with a Yamahama. As Elaine turns, she spots a moving truck across the street with the same number. A fake number? Blimey. My take, just two comedy powerhouses here. Both of their performances make this scene so incredibly funny. Elaine is now the ugly version of herself after being in the steam bath at H&H. And so it's Denim Vest's moment of being like, wait, why does this girl I met at Tim Watley's party so different now? The mumps and typhoid questions and then bringing back Yamahama with Denim Vest. So perfect. She's so ugly, he has to run away. It's ridiculous, but it works. Great reaction by JLD realizing it's a fake number. And I just don't get tired of her look. I actually thought of this like while I was watching the episode. I think I might be steamed Elaine for Halloween next year. It's very niche. Again, not a lot of people will get it. I'll do this with my hair. I'll smudge my makeup. I'll carry a bagel. I just think that would be so funny. And whoever recognizes me will instantly be my best friend. All right, next we are at the Kruger office. Mr. Kruger has George in his office saying that there's a problem. A memo here from accounting saying there's no such thing as the human fund. Well, there could be, George says, but there isn't. Well, Kruger doesn't understand. If the human fund doesn't exist, the gift you gave was fake. You better have a damn good excuse for giving me a fake Christmas present. Well, George resorts to Festivus as his excuse, which Kruger mishears as feminist. It's a funny moment. George says he was afraid that he'd be persecuted for his beliefs. Are you making all this up too? No, George says, and I can prove it if I have to. Yep, Kruger definitely wants him to prove it. One little thing in this scene that I noticed, the memo that Kruger is holding is very, very clearly a script. I think they just took pages of the script and used it as this prop. But even at the top, like the three that you see at the top, that's like I think that's the name of the studio. Or so like if you guys watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, whenever they show the exterior of Larry David's office, it's got that red 3. So it's clearly like a script. I just thought it was surprising that it was so blatantly not a memo. I'm like, you guys couldn't have typed that up in the prop department? All right, next we're at the Costanzas. George enters with Kruger saying, Happy Festivus. Frank is so surprised to even see George there. George introduces him to Mr. Kruger. Have you seen the poll, Kruger? He doesn't need to see the poll. He's going to see it. That's another favorite moment of mine. Jerry and Elaine enter. Elaine's trying to fix her makeup with a compact. George sees her and says, Yamahama. She says, I didn't have time to go home. What are you doing here? Embracing my roots. And Jerry knows what happened. He got nailed on the 20 G's, busted cold. Frank is explaining the poll to Kruger, who tells him he finds his beliefs fascinating. Kramer enters with the horse track betting guys. Elaine can't believe it. What are you guys doing here? Well, the guy tells her that they were calling her number, but got this bagel place. And Kramer says, well, I told them I was just about to see you, Elaine. It's a Festivus miracle. They all gather and sit at the table, and the two dudes crowd up right behind Elaine. I like this moment. Kruger recognizes Kramer, Dr. Van Nostrand, right? Kramer realizes his past with Kruger and plays along. That's right. I just want to call this out because, like I said, I am watching one of the worst shows I've ever seen, Emily in Paris. The writing in that show is so lazy and inconsistent. Like a thing like this where, hey, these two characters have met before in a humorous situation. It would make sense that Kruger would recognize Kramer as the doctor who checked him for moles. And it's just addressed in this little way. It's a little funny moment because, again, Michael Richards is a fantastic actor. So he just, yeah, that's right. Like, that's all it takes. But the show, Emily in Paris, first of all, there's nothing consistent about these characters. From day to day, the characters have different wants. They act differently. They react to things differently. It's infuriating. But also something like this where it's like, hey, these two people have a past. It doesn't make sense that they wouldn't recognize each other. All that stuff just never gets recognized on that show. And that keeps happening and it chips away at the show's chance of being good at all. So anyway, watching such a poorly written show, lazily written show, and then watching really solidly written shows, you really see the difference and how certain things don't take much, but explaining something can really make an impact and just give the show more credibility. Okay, I'm done with that. Sorry, I just wanted to recognize that that was a really smart moment in the script. Kruger recognizing Dr. Van Nostrand. All right, back to the scene. Frank starts with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. He starts with Kruger, says that my son tells me your company stinks. Oh, God, George says. And Frank tries to burn him. You couldn't smooth a silk sheet if you had a hot date with a babe. I lost my train of thought. Gwen enters and Jerry's like, how did you know I was here? Kramer told me. Once again, Kramer fucking everything up. She points at Elaine. I guess this is the ugly girl I've been hearing about. Hey, Elaine defends herself. I was in a schwitz for 6 hours. Give me a break. Gwen storms out and Jerry goes after her, but then shrieks, comes back and says, bad lighting on the porch. Elaine asks the guys, how'd my horse do? He had to be shot. Back to Frank. He wants to move on to the feats of strength. And the honor is going to go to Mr. Kramer. But then Kramer realizes he's late for a double shift at H&H. Turns out the strike is over. Kramer caved because he really needed to use their bathroom. And on his way out, he tells Frank, no offense, but this holiday's a bit... I can't do it like Kramer. But basically indicating it's nutso-butso. George yells for Kramer not to go. Who's going to do the feats of strength? Kruger says, how about George? While he takes a swig from a flask. Good thinking, Kruger. Until you pin me, George, Festivus is not over. As we see the exterior of the house, we hear Frank egging George on while George is saying, Uncle, Uncle. My take, this is one of the funniest scenes in the series. There's a reason this is a classic episode. I mean, this scene is just so brilliant. Elaine's portions are placed in this bigger scene, but I really like them. We get George's reaction, our third Yamahama. The comedy rule of 3 has been achieved. And also, here's another example of them quickly explaining something that would be a question. She says, I didn't have time to go home, and she's fixing her face with a compact. That explains it, because I think a lot of people would be like, wait, this was way later. Like, she couldn't have fixed her face, but that's all it takes. That's why she still looks like Alice Cooper. Clearly, none of the Emily in Paris writers have ever watched Seinfeld or any good comedy, to be honest. The creepers from the betting place showing up. Again, it's ridiculous, but because Kramer caused it, it's feasible for, I guess, this reality in Seinfeld. I mean, of course he'd bring them. He has no boundaries at all. And then we get that little moment of her asking how her horse did. And honestly, I cannot think of a better response than the horse having to be shot. Now, this is not because I hate horses. I love animals. I think it's actually, I hate horse racing. I think it is extremely cruel, but this is so extreme, and that's what makes it funny. Saying like he finished last, it wouldn't have been as funny. Of the shit show of all of this with Elaine and the phone relay and getting in the steam bath and the denim vest, like all of this stuff, of course her horse had to be shot. Like it's just a perfect button on her story. And then also just like the Bryan Cranston moment with Jerry, this has some of the best bloopers. In fact, in the Inside Look, the editor of this episode said it was really hard to edit this scene. Well, first of all, it's all of them around a table. So it's, a lot going on, a lot of different angles. But also that moment, Elaine, Tracy Letts, they cannot keep a straight face. She can't even get the sentence, hey, how'd my horse do? She keeps laughing because I think she knows the response of, he had to be shot. Really good bloopers. Highly recommend looking them up. Along with those bloopers, the bloopers of Kramer's trumpet sound making everyone fucking lose it is so good. Yeah, just so tough to get through this scene but so fun. I just think like I would love to have been there. And like I've said before, I love when episodes have these scenes with all four of them together, but we get incredible additions. We have the main four, but we also have Frank and Estelle, though Estelle barely gets anything. We have Kruger, we have the Creeper dudes, just pretty stellar ensemble, and it works so beautifully. And then the tag of the episode, Kramer kneading bagel dough and his gum falls in. Kramer struggling to get it out when his boss comes by. He sees the mess and he's like, all right, that's enough. You're fired. Kramer is relieved. Thank you. All right, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. Oh, hello. I'm Robert Smith from The Cure. If I'm known for anything, it's, well, being the lead singer of The Cure, but also my makeup. Introducing Yamahama Cosmetics by Robert Smith. Choose from a variety of products that will not stay in place no matter what. Specially formulated to be prone to smearing, smudging, and streaking. Yamahama Cosmetics will give you that face-melting look you are craving. Visit www.frightnightschwitz.yama to find the perfect shade of black, light black, off black, deep black, and blackest black for your face. Be sure to also pick up the unsetting spray to make sure your look smudges all day long. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off a raisin bagel at any H&H Bagels location in the New York area. Yamahama Cosmetics. Maybe you're born with it. Maybe it's typhoid. And we're back. There was some trivia I wanted to bring up. So, okay, with the whole Gwen storyline, the Two-Face, she's ugly, she's pretty, depending on the lighting. My major issue with this is that Karen Feynman doesn't look that ugly when they're trying to make her look ugly. She's a very beautiful actress. And so I just think it's odd that they didn't go at least a little bit more extreme with her, again, quote unquote, ugly face when the lighting is bad. And I thought to myself, I'm like, why wouldn't they just lean into it, hire like a dude even and put him in a wig? One of my favorite stories from Home Alone with Buzz's girlfriend. So if you're familiar with the movie, if you're not, what the hell are you doing with your life? There's a scene where Kevin, little Macaulay Culkin, finds a picture of his older brother's girlfriend. And he goes, Buzz, your girlfriend, woof. And we see the picture. And yes, it's not a very attractive, what appears to be girl in the picture. And I learned this maybe just a few years ago that the director, I think it's Chris Columbus who directed it, felt it was too cruel to cast a girl that's supposed to be ugly. So it's someone's son, I think on the crew, maybe his own son. I can't remember. Anyway, they cast a young boy and put a wig on him. And so that's what it ends up being. So I don't know. I just think in this scenario where Gwen is supposed to be so incredibly ugly that Jerry cannot even recognize her, I don't know, just lean into it. And I thought of the Home Alone example. I'm like, a dude in a wig would have been hilarious, but in the trivia, I read this. It says, the original plan for this episode was to have two women playing the part of Gwen. Suzanne Krull was to be the ugly Gwen, while Karen Feynman would be the pretty Gwen. In the end, it was decided having the same role played by two different women would be too confusing for the audience, so Feynman played the part of both Gwens instead. I understand why they didn't go with this plan. I did look up Suzanne Krull. It's hard to be like, hey, can you play the ugly chick? But at the same time, as an actor, you're very self-aware of what you're right for. Now, I realize, I think people are like, oh, that's so cruel to be like, hey, can you play the ugly lady? But if you look at Suzanne Krull, she's got a very unique face. I wouldn't necessarily call her ugly, but she definitely looks like a little stretched out version. The nose is a little bigger. The cheeks are a bit gaunt. She's not an ugly woman. She could pull off being the quote unquote ugly Gwen. And look, as an actor, you're very aware of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. When you're not a typically pretty person, that actually can be an asset. I mean, this Suzanne Krull almost got to be in an episode of Seinfeld because of her looks. So you take that as you will. I understand it sounds super cruel, but that's also Hollywood, and it's also the nature of being an actor. When you have the face you have to go for the roles that make sense. Anyway, all that being said, I don't know if I agree. I think it, again, could have been really funny to just lean into the absurdity here and just have it be a different woman. Or I think another option could have been just seeing her from the back, not even seeing the face and just having Jerry react. If they shot it from behind and we saw the back of her head when she approached at that restaurant and Jerry just being like, "Oh, Gwen." And then it all gets explained anyway. It's like, oh my God, the lighting was bad and she kept changing. She's a two-faced, blah, blah, blah. Instead of, all I can see that they do is they try and make these dark circles under her eyes. They kind of put something, I think, in like her upper lip to make her lip kind of curl up. It doesn't work. I mean, her hair is still impeccable. It just, I don't know. I don't think what they went with works very well. I think they still should have gone with two different actresses or go all in and have a dude wear a wig and dub in Karen Feynman's voice. That would have been hilarious. All right, let's move on to Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and every week he sends us a sack full of his thoughts. His overall thoughts about the strike, he says, "We get the introduction of Festivus here, which has become a part of pop culture zeitgeist ever since. We also get great appearances by Whatley, Kruger, and the Costanzas, which makes this an extra great one. While each of the storylines is just okay on their own, it is all salvaged in a lot of great jokes and some good crossover amongst the characters." Yes, I agree. I'm going to get into this more into my final notes, but I think this is one of the best constructed episodes of the series. So well done. I actually think all of the storylines are more than just okay. I think they're all really funny, and I will get more into that in a little bit. Next in Greg's Sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, "This episode jumps right into the storyline without any sort of unrelated opening scene, and I like that here, especially with George, Elaine, and Jerry all together at a Whatley party. This first scene is excellent with so many funny lines amongst the three. My favorite here is when Elaine compliments the denim vest with, 'I like the big metal buttons.' This is probably my favorite Elaine line of the episode, and it's purely in her delivery. Oh, I know. It's just written, 'I like the big metal buttons.' That's just how it's written on a piece of paper on the script. Maybe that was a piece of paper used as the memo prop. I don't know. But it's JLD bringing that special sauce saying big metal buttons." This is why she's brilliant. Next, Greg says, "Not an Elaine line, but I love when she goes to the horse betting place and the two guys tell her they've received a lot of calls for her. The way Charlie with his big perm in the background repeats, 'I'm a man,' has always cracked me up." Oh my gosh, we're so on the same page. So I wanted to mention, in the inside look, Julia Louis-Dreyfus says that I believe that actor was a porn star. So I did a little research on him. He's not a porn star, but I think he had like a porn obsession. So he used to host like a public access or some kind of show. I mean, this was before YouTube, but like some kind of like low budget show, cooking with the porn stars or getting sleazy with, I think his name's Colin Malone. Anyway, he used to host things where porn stars were his guests, like cooking shows and just like talk shows. I don't think he was an actual porn star himself, but he was definitely involved in that world. But anyway, so I'm just correcting JLD because she incorrectly said that. No, I'm just kidding. So for years, actually, before I did this research, I thought he was an actual porn star because I remember JLD mentioning that. But a little bit more clarification. And that just adds to it too. I don't know why. He is pretty sleazy in real life. And then he plays this sleazy, I'm a man character. Next, Greg says, "The Festivus dinner scene at the Costanzas is one of the series' best scenes. It is mostly carried by Jerry Stiller, who delivers such a great performance here. What I love most is that all four are there and only Kramer is really excited for it. My only problem is this scene was just not long enough." It's a pretty long scene for a sitcom. I think it takes up a good 6 minutes, I want to say. Like it's a hefty scene considering it's like a 23-minute episode. But I know what you mean, Greg. I know having all four together with the addition of such amazing other cast members. I could have watched an entire episode. It could have been like another Chinese restaurant, just the same setting for the entire episode. And we would have gotten a lot of great moments. Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, the two-face thing is probably the dumbest bit going on, but I forgive it because it's only slotted in here and there. And even Elaine's story of wanting a free sandwich she's earned is sort of dumb, but I like it because it brings her into different locations and lets her play off some new characters we haven't seen before. Ultimately, what I would change would be more of everyone together at Festivus and whittle down some of what brings everyone there. I needed more Frank and George together with Elaine and Jerry there observing the ridiculous Costanza family dynamic. Agreed. And more Estelle. I think we needed more Estelle. What a jip. She just gets to say one line and then a couple off camera. It's like, no, come on. You have Estelle. How can you just give her one or two lines? And what's Estelle's take on Festivus? I would have loved to know that. That's what's missing from this episode for sure. I'm going to get more into the storylines. I've already explained why I like Elaine's storyline. Yes, it's dumb. She wants a free sub, but I just love that they gave this to Elaine because it is so stupid. She's allowed to be stupid. And you know me, when it's something against a female character being a killjoy or just a girlfriend or, the typical things we see females doing in sitcoms, I'm all for it. So I forgive it for that reason. And some of Greg's other thoughts. He says, H&H Bagels is a real New York City chain, and I can happily say I've been a frequent customer since moving here. I remember back in the late 90s, I went to a location on my first trip to New York City just because I had seen this episode, and I was shocked that at the time they didn't put cream cheese on the bagels. It was just straight up bagels. And I think they had containers of cream cheese you could buy, but they didn't put any on your bagel. I still think this is so bizarre. Who raw dogs a bagel? Since then, they must have changed their strategy or something, since every bagel place makes you the sandwich. Oh, wow. That is very interesting. Now you ask for the bagel and then you ask for the cream cheese. Like I know at Einstein, they put like a huge thick slather of the cream cheese. I don't need the layer of cream cheese to be as thick as the bagel because sometimes that's how they serve it. Next, Greg says, I have to call out the guy in the perm again who sits behind Elaine at the Festivus dinner. The faces this guy makes absolutely crack me up. He has a Jack Black quality, but slimier and without even having to say a word. Oh, Greg, I totally agree on all of this. Like I said, he really makes an impact just by his face. I mean, he looks like Jack Black. Completely agree with that. I mean, he just steals the scene. Even though Tracy Letts is really funny, Elaine's really funny, your eye goes to the slimiest dude because of all those faces. Oh, what a find. The perfect sleazy man for this role. And lastly, Greg says, one of my issues with this episode is the stuff that ends up in the food. First, Paco's rubber band in the soup at Monk's, and then Kramer's gum ending up in the bagel dough. It absolutely disgusts me. Oh, I could definitely see that, Greg. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for sending in your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. Okay, my favorite Elaine moments, big metal buttons. So good. Like I said, it's a simple line, but it's JLD's magic saying it that way. It makes it so funny. And a close second, I want that free sub. Different interpretation, right? But the emotion behind every word and how it's delivered. Oh, absolutely love it. And my final notes. Elaine's plot is a great example of taking a few elements and combining them perfectly. So she's got denim vest, fake number, atomic sub card, desperately wanting the free sub. It's so balanced between sort of absurd and grounded. And then that's kind of my favorite thing. Absurd and grounded can work well together, but you have to balance it out properly. I believe she would want that free sub, and going to the lengths she does is, again, totally bonkers, but given the tone of the show at this point in the series, I don't have a hard time believing this. This is where Elaine is in her journey, for lack of a better word. She's been influenced by these idiots that she's chosen as her closest friends, and I have no trouble believing this for her. She's going to go to all these lengths to get her free sub. And most importantly, it's entertaining. They do a good job with it. It's a dumb plot. It's a dumb thing she's doing, but they make it entertaining because of really good writing. I will say, I think it's somewhat relatable. Those punch cards that still exist today, they are weirdly addicting. I have one at the nail place I go to. I am obsessed with, like, at the end of my appointment, I'm like, I have my punch card because I want to get my, like, whatever, 20% off my next manicure or whatever after however many manicures. I don't even know the rules about it, but I know that I have a punch card and I want it punched. I want it stamped. And the mentality of that it is so weird, but it works. I mean, even though you spend so much money just getting to whatever that reward is, the free item, the discount, you want it. It's an odd sense of accomplishment. So there's that whole level to her plot as well. It's kind of relatable. I think a lot of people be like, I get it. I get it. You put on all this work and then you lost your card. Damn it. This episode has really fun moments for JLD to showcase her comedic skills, a lot of range of emotions, ups and downs. Plus, we get to see steamed Elaine. And while, yes, her makeup looks a mess in the steam, her skin was probably glowing for the next few days because those pores got opened up, baby. You know, steaming is part of a facial, so good for her. Now, this is a classic episode because of Festivus, which is the superior plot. There's no doubt about that. But I think they do a great job with everyone's plot. I don't think any of them are weak. I really think they're all pretty solid. And it all works because they dovetail together. I would imagine, even though he's not on the show at this point anymore, Larry David would approve of this episode. It's very dovetailed together. Everyone's brought together. There's involvement across plots. I love that. Perfectly structured episode. And I think that's all I can say about the strike. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.